Let's do it.
This episode has been brought to you by JustNForm.com. If you're tired of being censored, tired of having your data stolen and sold, go to JustNForm.com, a social media site where all voices are welcome.
What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream session of Mi Casa Su Casa. And I actually have it's going to be a good video today because we're going to hear from the founder of Justice Democrats, which actually a lot of us were probably waiting to hear from. If you didn't know, Kyle Kulinski, who is part of the TYT network, although he 90% of the time doesn't agree with them. He has a show called Secular Talk. It's a very popular show, roughly 500,000 plus subscribers. Overall, I think Kyle's heart is mostly in the right place, although I don't always agree with him or his analysis on everything regarding the left and the right. But, you know, he gets it right most of the time. And he's going to respond to questions in his live stream from Jimmy Dore. He did a video last night covering it. And Kyle usually is never one to back down from a tough question. And I admire him for that because a lot of people would have dodged that, right? If you're the founder of the Justice Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a Justice Democrat, clearly the most popular Justice Democrat, and would likely be considered to be the representative, like the most popular representative or the ambassador of Justice Democrats thus far. So I want to go ahead and play this video for you. I want to give a quick shout out to the Progressive Voice. Thanks for covering this. I wanted to make sure we got you in the video so that you can be properly credited, and I appreciate you breaking it down. Let's take a look.
All right, so if you guys already saw my video yesterday, I talked about Jimmy Dore going off on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she endorsed Andrew Cuomo for governor. She said, while she was on CNN, she said, we need to rally behind all Democrats, including the governor, which obviously was referring to Andrew Cuomo. And Jimmy Dore absolutely ripped into Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for that. He got really angry. Now, he made a few claims, and I talked about those, and I will go in depth with them again in this video. But essentially, he says that she shouldn't have endorsed him, which I agree with, and then he makes a claim that I disagree with. Now, we have Kyle Kulinski, who did a Secular Talking Smack, and someone asked him about this, and I think that it's pretty important to look at this because it's most definitely vital for the progressive movement moving forward. So let's actually see what Kyle had to say about what Jimmy Dore had stated.
You guys ready for this? Watch this.
What I also look forward to moving forward is us rallying behind all Democratic nominees, including the governor, to make sure that he wins in November.
She's a Democrat, so she has to tell everybody that Andrew Cuomo is the answer. There is no progressive takeover of the Democratic Party. Do you need any? What the F? And when Bernie said he was calling for a revolution, he wasn't being truthful. That was just a gimmick. He's not being truthful. He won't come on this show and talk about it. Bernie won't even come on the show. He'll do any interview with anybody if you said you voted for Hillary. But if you didn't, Bernie won't come near you. That's the opposite of political courage. When he went from filling stadiums, when he decided to back Hillary Clinton, he couldn't fill a gymnasium after that. So I thought Alexandria Ocasio was any blue just won't do. I saw her with Lena Turner just the other day saying any blue just won't do. Well, if fucking Andrew Cuomo isn't any blue just won't do, who are you talking about? Andrew, so any blue just won't do until it has to?
What do you think of Jimmy Dore saying that taking over the Democratic Party is useless? I don't know if he said that, but if he did say that, I don't agree with that. I've talked about this before. I'm in favor of an all-the-above approach. I'll vote for people on the left wherever they happen to be. I don't care if they're in the Green Party. I don't care if they're an independent. I don't care if they're in some weird new third party that nobody's ever heard of. I'll vote for people who are populist left no matter where they fall. And I think to rule out voting for progressives if they happen to be within the Democratic Party, I don't think that's a good idea. I disagree with that completely. Big fan, Kyle. What do you think about Jimmy Dore's video discussing Andrew Gillum and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez playing ball with Cuomo and Booker? I honestly don't trust Gillum at all anymore after what you guys have said. Well, listen, I never really trusted Gillum. I just pointed out the fact that he was the best available option in the race. But that doesn't mean I trust him. That doesn't mean I trust him. Because he supported Hillary over Bernie in the primary, which tells me he's a careerist. Because he thought there's no way that Hillary's going to lose, because that's what all the conventional wisdom was. So he wasn't going to blow his future career by supporting Bernie. So he supported Hillary. But Bernie is a nice enough guy and an open-hearted enough guy to say, hey, if I could convince Gillum to be in favor of my policy proposals, then I will actively campaign for Gillum, while Hillary's doing nothing. So that's what happened. Gillum became more of a Bernie-type character when he realized, oh, this is where the momentum in the party is, and I'll get Bernie support if I do it. So I never really trusted Gillum, and when you see him in a video with Cory Booker, you know, your fears are basically come true. Like, okay, he may be better than a standard corporate Democrat, but he's still got a streak of corporatism in him and careerism in him. So he's better than the other available options. That's the reality, but that doesn't mean he's good, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't take your guard down. Now, as far as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez goes, yeah, if I was advising her, I would have said, don't endorse Cuomo. What are you doing? If you're going to fucking endorse him, at the very least, extract stuff from him. You got to remember, we have the people power on our side because we are for the popular policies. You don't need him. He needs you. He needs to genuflect at your altar. You don't need to genuflect at his altar. And if he doesn't genuflect at your altar, you know what you say? I'm not saying anything. I'm staying out of the race. You just won't get my endorsement. But instead, to say, oh, I'm going to support him without getting any extractions from him and promises of progressive policy, what you're doing is you're saying blue no matter who, which is not correct. That's a terrible idea because then they're going to keep getting away with what they want to get away with, which is being rank corporatist neoliberals. So I don't agree with her on that strategy. But having said that, do I agree with people who go too far and say, oh my God, this means that she's a sellout? No, she's not a sellout. Are you kidding me? She's right on all the issues, and I think that's what's most important. And I don't agree with people who say, oh, this means the takeover of the Democratic Party isn't even worth it. Because we have 26 Justice Democrats who have advanced, which is a win rate of about 30%. You have Our Revolution and PCCC, who have a 50% win rate and a 67% win rate, respectively. So the idea that the takeover of the Democratic Party from the left is not working is just not true. We've made gigantic gains. And to poo-poo that is wrong because it's just factually inaccurate. So you can't expect a full takeover when we haven't even had a general election yet since the 2016 election. We've had a handful of special elections and we've had primaries. We did well in the primaries. So to poo-poo it is a bad idea. But I disagree with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I would have told her you need to get extractions from Andrew Cuomo.
All right, so if you had seen my video from yesterday, I had...
So that was a lot to take in, obviously. So once again, thanks Progressive Voice for putting that together. And shout out to both Jimmy and Kyle. I agree with them most of the time on most of the issues, but you don't have to be in agreement with people 100% of the time in order to respect their journalistic integrity. So shout out to both of those guys. Now, I want to go ahead and start off with Jimmy's video, which most of you all saw a couple of days back. So Jimmy essentially asserts that there is no progressive takeover of the party, and that AOC was wrong for endorsing Cuomo. Well, the official campaign statement is that it was not an endorsement. So we'll say for urging people to support Cuomo. I can't really see how anyone would have a problem with that statement. She should not have, period. point blank. As a journalist, I would expect Jimmy, as someone with integrity, to hold her accountable for that, because Jimmy is looking at the grand scheme, as we all should, of what that means. He's looking at the optics, which in politics are just as important, if not at times, depending on the situation, more important than the actual policies. Because optically, if progressives do not look like they are willing to put up a fight outside of the office, then they are definitely not going to put up a fight inside, because it's going to be one capitulation after another, right? I think that's what the general concern is. Andrew Gillum didn't even get into office before he just changed policy stances, which is why I believe so many people hold him in higher disregard than AOC at this very moment. He also says, once again, that there is no takeover, no progressive takeover of the Democratic Party. And I actually tend to agree with him at this point in time. I don't think there is a progressive takeover of the Democratic Party. There are a lot of progressive Democrats. I'm not saying that. Understand what I'm saying. Kyle, which I'll get into a little bit later on in the video, but Kyle has a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Democratic Party works and how to take over the Democratic Party. Merely running for office and buying into the idea that we have to get elected and then make change is I don't want to say naive, because I don't want to insult the guy. He's intelligent, but it's naive from an experiential standpoint. As somebody who's worked in politics, as somebody who's been a part of the Democratic Party and caucused with the African American Caucus of North Carolina, like, I see how it works. I see how the shoulder rubbing goes. I see what people are willing to do to silence other candidates who are helping, or who could potentially shut down the other candidate who's going to give them a job once they get elected. I've seen it. And then Jimmy also goes on to bring up Bernie Sanders. And he's right. I think, he's 70% right. I do believe that Bernie thought his idea of a revolution is being implemented. And in a lot of ways, I would call it an informational awakening. I would call it an existential awakening regarding how progressives view themselves and what our responsibility is in changing the system and being educated, and then taking that knowledge and educating others as we move forward. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to make change, right? And once again, when Jimmy brings up the fact that Bernie won't go on his show, I agree with him. That is suspect. What question could he possibly ask you that you would shy away from if you knew the right answer? If you were going to give the genuine answer, the answer that you know is correct. You all know how I feel about Bernie personally. I respect him. I know his family. I know they're genuine. However, just like all my really good friends, when he's messing up, I will absolutely call him out, because his influence is so great that it can affect the outcome of any election, any policy application, any war drums that may be beating. His voice is that powerful. And it's our duty as a journalist, you as a progressive, you as an activist, if you're a politician, it is your duty that whenever he gets it wrong, you have to call him out. And Bernie is wrong for not going on Jimmy Dore's show, because it looks like he has. What are you worried about? That he's going to ask you about Syria? That because you were beating the war drums about Syria, Bernie. Don't forget, you were in the beginning. That first time Trump launched those missiles, you were pretty much advocating for regime change with Assad, but you did say, to your defense, that you did not want another war, another proxy war, another Middle Eastern quagmire is what you called it. But you were still beating those war drums. You were. And you were wrong. And Jimmy, as a journalist, I personally believe has the right to challenge that, to challenge your convictions if this is something you believe is the morally right thing to do and subsequently is the morally right thing to peddle to whoever follows you. When you avoid going on Jimmy's show, that's where the problem, it's where it looks suspect. It looks bad. You were willing to go on before. You're not willing to go on now. You were willing to go on every single media that endorses Hillary Clinton, but you're not willing to go on to the independent media and engage with the independent community who elevated you to the platform that you have right now. So Jimmy is absolutely right. Mike S. made up another good point. He's probably also worried that Jimmy will ask him about Russia. Yeah, as he should. Because if you have the facts for the conspiracy theories that you were pushing, you shouldn't be worried about who's going to ask you questions about Russiagate. It's really that simple. Now, back to AOC. What Jimmy said about the, if Andrew Cuomo, if it's Andrew Cuomo will do when you're supposedly, any Democrat or any blue just won't do. Any Democrat just won't do. Mind you, these are AOC's words, right? These are her words. What the hell is Cuomo? What there is like at certain levels of government, there is the epitome of any blue just won't do. Dianne Feinstein in the Senate. Definition of any, that's the reason that statement was created. That phrase became popular because of people like Dianne Feinstein. If not Dianne Feinstein. At the House level, Nancy Pelosi would be the epitome of any blue just won't do. At the gubernatorial level, Andrew Cuomo is the all-encompassing epitome of any blue just won't do. He is pretty much a Republican, but he sells out for neoliberal and neoconservative policies, so it's perfectly fine. He's so bad, the Working Families Party, to my knowledge, had to rescind their endorsement of him. He is bad. So what Jimmy is saying in regard to you're not keeping up your word, you went from any blue just won't do to we should vote for everybody who's blue, including Andrew Cuomo. Now, once again, I got a statement, an official statement from the campaign saying that she is absolutely not endorsing Cuomo and that she misspoke. And I do believe she needs to come out like she did when people misconstrued what she was saying about Nancy Pelosi and correct that. She's a 28-year-old former activist, newborn politician who had the weight of the progressive world thrusted on her shoulders. And I admit that she can make mistakes, and she will probably make a few mistakes rhetorically in the future. But like a good friend of mine said yesterday, she now has the responsibility to not underhandedly or inconspicuously backtrack. It needs to be a conspicuous, full-throated backtrack included with an explanation about what you actually meant. I think that's perfectly reasonable to ask, of you on behalf of the progressive movement, who believes in you and who will be the reason that you get anything done, if you do get anything done going forward. Now, I want to go ahead and touch on what Kyle says. Kyle said that he actually agrees with Jimmy. And this is the founder of the Justice Democrats, in which in which AOC is part of. And that says a lot, because when Jimmy came out with that video holding AOC accountable, people got really upset. And I don't agree with that. They're like, oh, he's a aggressive. He's just upset all the time. And I'm going to address that. But they got upset at him for calling her out. And it's really unfortunate to me that we've been seeing this pattern of, oh my God, this isn't what I want to hear, therefore it's wrong. No, unfortunately, the truth is oftentimes more uncomfortable than the lie, the convenient lie. It's a fact. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to tell you. But Jimmy was dropping facts. He didn't disparage her, I don't think. He didn't lie. Jimmy keeps the receipts. Just because you don't like what he has to say, or you don't like his delivery, or the way he conveys it, doesn't make it any less of a lie. I mean, any less of the truth. But, I mean, you want him to lie. That's essentially because it makes you feel better. Like you wanted him to come up with an excuse as to why it was okay that she did that, so that people wouldn't abandon her, so that your personal goals, whatever that may be, for whatever reason that is, don't get affected by AOC potentially losing her mandate. Like, at the end of the day, if we're willing to sacrifice our morals and values and the integrity of our journalism and our journalists to get our goals achieved, how are we any different from the neoliberals or the neocons who are trying to usurp? Kyle agrees with Jimmy in that regard. Now, he disagreed with Jimmy in another regard, which I disagree with him about. He said that it's not a bad idea to take over the Democratic Party. I actually agree with him. It is not a bad idea to take over the Democratic Party. It is also not a bad idea to take over the Republican Party if you are, slightly conservative, but are a populist. Like the Rand Paul type of guy. I don't think that Rand Paul is 100% right on almost anything. But when it comes to being anti-war and frivolous spending on the military-industrial and prison-industrial complex, Rand Paul gets it right 90% of the time. So I think that we should also be working on taking over the Republican Party. The conservative light should be working on that. Also, the Green Party actually needs a little bit of reformation and guidance of their trajectory as well. And the Libertarian Party just needs to get it all together. Y'all are really organized, but your policy platforms that is not Ron Paul's party, okay? But I believe the more legitimate parties, the more we have access to legitimate conversations, the more at that point, because everybody's having the same general conversations, the character of candidates begin to show. So not only do we get to witness what they believe policy-wise, but we also get to see where they stand objectively when it comes to their integrity, because maybe everybody is saying the same thing, but their reasoning and rationality is different. So I agree with Kyle there. We need to be taking over every party, because at the end of the day, no matter what we want to believe, once again, belief versus reality. No matter what we want to believe, people, the Democratic Party is the second largest, second most powerful, if not the most powerful party in the country. Powerful meaning they can control the message and control the trajectory of this country. Now, I don't mean powerful as in winning office. I mean powerful as in, oh, look, we have Donald Trump in office and the Republicans have control of everything. That kind of powerful. Powerful as in sanctions against Russia over a lie that they just want to maintain in front of the mainstream media. Powerful. That is a different type of power that can't be quantitated or qualified, but it is power. And it is clearly influencing all the conversations that we're having today. So you want to leave that just hanging there, dangling there? No, they do need to be taken over. Now, where I disagree with Kyle is his assertion that there is actively a takeover of the Democratic Party. Like that we're winning the takeover of the Democratic Party. I don't believe that. Now, the justification that Kyle Kulinski uses, 26 Justice Democrats have advanced. He also goes into discussing our revolution, and JD wins. It's like 56% and 60% respectively. But Kyle doesn't really seem to be displaying an understanding of how party politics work. Party politics is not getting elected. Peter Dow has never been in office to my knowledge. John Podesta has never been in elected office to my knowledge. Donna Brazile has never been in elected office to my knowledge. Maybe, but I don't think so. She's been what they call operative. The new guy who's running the Justice Democrats and the BNC, Zach Exley, the one that Tim Canova had to kick off of his campaign because he was corrupt, who ends up being in charge of BNC and I believe even has some control of the Justice Democrats. He never ran for office, but why not? You're so concerned with the success of the country. The only time he started running with progressives is recently. But you see how that's been turning out. Justice Democrats, the infrastructure is a mess. Their messaging is not necessarily on point with the progressive messaging. And after Kyle was kicked off of the Justice Democrats as the leader and the founding board member, they started endorsing neoliberals on the West Coast almost immediately. But just because a candidate gets elected to office doesn't mean they have control of the party politics that takes place in their states, their municipality, or the greater national Democratic Party. So to say 50% of your candidates got past their Democratic primary and therefore are even give them a 60%. How many of those have influence on the party? Right now, and once again, it's not a jab at AOC, but this is the reality. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the most popular Justice Democrat, probably second or third most popular progressive in the country, at or tied with Tulsi Gabbard, right behind Bernie Sanders. And with all of her popularity, with an absolute mandate from progressives who when she first got elected would have stomped the hill to see her policies get passed. With all the television time, with all of the access to the independent journalists that Justice Democrats have been able to tap into in the past, she does not have influence on the Democratic Party and the Democratic operatives. What they actually did was ramp up and started forcing her to capitulate, doing, off the wall things like continuing to maintain the endorsement, like Joe Crowley, continuing to maintain the endorsement that the Working Families Party rescinded just so he can stay on the ballot, just so he can siphon votes away from her. Because the Republican Party, mind you, there are people in the Democratic lobbying corps that are donating to Crowley still. And they are more than willing to work with Republicans to make sure a progressive does not get elected. They've already proven that. They will knock people off of that voter roll. You're aware of that in that AOC race, which is important to remember when trying to understand why she's treading water at the moment. She's walking a thin line. She could legitimately lose that race. They will blame it on low voter turnout. They will blame it on progressive policies not being acceptable. They will say, look, progressive policies are so unacceptable that a Republican got elected in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. But what people don't know is that somebody who worked for the Working Families Party at one point, I know how important that working families name is to the investors of the Working Families Party. People walk door to door, and their only job is to get people to donate consistently. To donate consistently to the Working Families Party. So if you see Working Families Party Joe Crowley, but you don't necessarily know who he is, necessarily, and you see Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you're like, well, I put my money into this endorsement here, this Working Families Party endorsement. I believe in the Working Families Party, and I don't believe I'm wrong for believing in the Working Families Party. So therefore, I am going to vote where my money is, as most people tend to do, right? Now, do you think that reality and Ocasio-Cortez understanding that reality and what that would mean for the narrative of the progressive movement going forward doesn't have any effect on why she is a little bit uneasy and choppy when it comes to the rhetoric regarding other candidates, especially with the recent rules change for an elected office that she can't win? I mean, that she hasn't won. My apologies. They can still choose someone else. The moment she doesn't sound like a Democrat, they can take Crowley and put him in her place. And we wouldn't be able to sue this time because the charter says so. And that probably has a lot to do with the rhetoric that you've seen from AOC. And some people would make the legitimate argument, well, Cuomo trashed AOC. You're right. Well, Cuomo trashed progressives. Yeah, you're right about that also. But Cuomo's playing for the establishment. And the rules are tipped in their favor. And we need to just accept that and navigate that correctly. Now, lastly, there are a lot of people. Oh, real quick, before I go to that point. So with Kyle's assertion about the takeover of the Democratic Party, just because you have people in office doesn't mean you're taking over the party. If you don't have delegates sitting in those meetings, then you're not taking over the Democratic Party. If you don't have delegates voting state Democratic Party presidents and our chairs and vice chairs out of office and putting chairs and progressive chairs and vice chairs in their place, then you don't have a takeover of the Democratic Party. You can have a 60%. Our Revolution, for example, doing a great job, not discounting them at all, but our Revolution may have 60%, a 60% win ratio right now. But that's included with, city hall election, or not city hall, city council elections, like commissioner elections, state representative elections, important elections indeed. But the big races, the major nationally watched races that our Revolution candidates were a part of, namely, for example, Cynthia Nixon and Abdul Saeed. I challenge you, Kyle. I assert this claim. If there was a takeover of the Democratic Party, Cynthia Nixon has all the Democrats in the state of New York behind her, making sure that every single ballot is being counted right in front of her campaign. She is suing the New York Board of Elections with the support of the progressive Democratic Party that would be taken over. If Abdul Saeed running for governor in Michigan. If there was a Democratic Party takeover, if we're going to use the loose number of 60 or 50%, 50% to 60% of Democrats around the country would have been rallying behind the clear discrepancies in the voting and the electioneering that was taking place. The Democrats would be banding together to sue for all of the purges. The purges are just enough, because that affects the democratic process. But once again, that's only if you have control of the party, not a candidate in office who can be controlled by the party, because the only way they can maintain their power or their influence, whether it be in their state or in the national sphere, they have to stay elected. In order to stay elected, they have to be able to be a Democrat. Stay elected as a Democrat, I mean. They have to be able to remain a Democrat. In order to be able to remain a Democrat, you now have certain rules you have to obey due to the charter of the DNC and the DCCC, that if you violate, you will be removed and replaced. And therefore, how much control can an elected official have over the Democratic Party anyway? You need delegates. You need votes within state Democratic parties. You need to usurp chairs and vice chairs. You need to do what neither Jimmy nor Kyle has brought up. And I got a lot of love for both of them and their analyses. Democratic Party this, Green Party that, Independent Party this, party, let's all get wasted. Hey, anybody want to talk about the fact that Cynthia Nixon was probably the victor, but she lost? Did she lose because she was a Democrat? No, she probably had a better opportunity to win because she was a Democrat. She lost because election rigging, electioneering, election fraud is taking place with absolutely no accountability. Howie, who's running in New York right now, is not going to debate Cuomo. They won't allow him to debate Cuomo. Why? Hell, he had to work just to get access on the ballot. He's a Green Party candidate. So why hasn't the Green Party done a better job of addressing the infrastructural issues in our election system? Why hasn't Kyle, who I respect, and Jimmy, who I love and respect, why haven't they discussed this aspect that is probably the most important aspect? So Zenga actually said that's a better term to use. That I would agree with. She said that starting to think that we should call it an infiltration as opposed to a takeover. That would be the best way to codify the Democratic Party situation in regards to progressives moving into the party. Perfect. Best work. If Kyle would want to convince me that the infiltration of the Democratic Party has been successful thus far, absolutely. That I would agree with. But taking over the Democratic Party, not even close. I have a question. If it wasn't Bernie Sanders running for office in 2020, because he's running, in case you didn't know, he's running. Would any other legitimate progressive, no matter how good their policies were, have a chance to win? If Tulsi ran, Tulsi would win if all things were equal. But let's be honest, all things are not going to be equal. The reason that they made these rules, and especially the one where they maintain that the vice president still gets chosen by the superdelegates, they made that rule because they know Bernie is, he's not a spring chicken, more like a winter rooster at this point. Still fit, still healthy, but you never know. And guess who takes over? This is not a new game plan. This is something we've seen in the past. Look up the FDR Henry Wallace situation. Look up how Truman got into power. it wasn't legitimate. And look what always happens next. A bomb got dropped. I lied. 2 bombs got dropped. And a Cold War started. All because of an illegitimate election in a rigged electoral process that no one wants to discuss the infrastructural issues with getting ballot access for the Green Party so that we can say legitimately Bernie should run green because it's better than the Democratic Party, and we would believe with all of our heart and soul that he had an actual chance to win. That AOC could lead the Democratic Party and say exactly how she feels about the Dems and go to a Green Party or an Independent Party or the Movement for the People's Party or the People's Independent Party and actually have a chance to get on the debate stage for a presidential election. Instead of using these arbitrary polling that, they're not arbitrary, I lied. The polling that is literally used to influence the outcome of elections as the determining factor as to whether or not someone gets on the debate stage. People are running for office, and I always continue to encourage them to do so. But at the end of the day, for all the time the Green Party spends on vote for me, vote for me, vote for me, I don't think that they shouldn't, because we all know the Republican Party and the Democratic Party can work together and multitask to screw your infrastructure, your voting and electoral infrastructure up while running for office. So I'm sure the Green Party has the capability, and the Libertarian Party has the capability to do the same thing. If you're running people for office, don't waste people's time. Let's start getting ballot initiatives on the election ballots. Let's start introducing ranked choice voting. Let's start making sure that our Board of Elections officials are elected officials, not appointed. Let's start making sure that we're holding our Board of Election officials accountable. Party politics is not only limited to the discussion of the duopoly. When you are constantly advocating for a third party, or saying we need to have Green Party people run, and that people should run to the Green Party, Independent Party, and not subsequently saying, but we also need to be working on our infrastructure that prevents them from winning, then you are still partaking in the disillusionment that is party politics. There are so many people that understand this, that are on the ground. Tim Canova being one of the main people who understands this. A lot of respect for him. But Jimmy is rightfully jaded by the Democrats. He's upset. He's pissed. He's angry because Jimmy, quite frankly, is in a very comfortable place in his life. He is. It's no secret. He does very well for himself, and I'm happy because people who do great for others absolutely should do great for themselves. But even as he is ascending to a level in journalism that he's never reached before, becoming more popular than the network that he works for, having more shows, doing well on Super Chats, living in LA, he is still so much more concerned about everybody who doesn't have the ability to be as financially stable as he is. That's why he's angry. A lot of people that say, well, no, we have to, we can't call them out. And there is a lot of people who say that about a lot of the progressive politicians. We can't call them out. That's because you're okay with the status quo. You don't live in Flint, Michigan. You don't live in Haiti or Syria. Your job is stable. Your situation, your support system is stable. The rest of us are pissed. The rest of us are angry, and rightfully so. There are also that sect of that same group who are so worried because they work in some capacity with the Democratic Party or with Democratic candidates. They don't want to ruin their opportunity to have influence on the party. So it's a selfish motivation. Now, at more than anything else, Jimmy's also entitled to his opinion. I am very aware of the circumstantial evidence, or the circumstances, I should say, not circumstantial evidence, but the circumstances surrounding AOC's very complex race. And that's why I have a different opinion. I have a different analysis. But my objective is the same as Jimmy's. Jimmy's objective is the same as Kyle's. Tim's objective is the same as mine. We want the same things, but we have different opinions on how to go about them. But all this sensationalist, reactionary, oh, she's the worst person in the world. Oh, she's the next coming of St. Mary. How about she's a 28-year-old activist who got more than what she bargained for in a race that she probably wasn't expecting to win. And now the weight of the progressive movement is on her shoulders with her values, her integrity, and her pride out on the line, knowing that her race, win or lose, which is that there is a possibility of that happening, will be reflective of how the media portrays your progressive movement. And that causes you to be overcautious when you focus on the big picture that much. When you hyper focus on the big picture, you kind of like lose yourself in the big picture and forget that the things that you're saying day to day are being amplified because of the position that you're in. It does not excuse her. She has to get better. She must get better, and she will get better. I do have faith in that. Because when you have someone willing to go onto CNN and say, how do we have money for war but not healthcare? You're not going to be able to convince me that that's a sellout or a progressive. I'm sorry. That's... Bernie won't even say that. Not anymore. Bernie will say something like, we have money for the prison industrial complex and not healthcare, or the big bankers. The big bankers! Wall Street. But he won't say that W word. We have money for regime change, but we don't have money to give kids health care. That type of person has a lot of integrity. I don't agree with 100% of what any of these people are saying. So let me just go ahead and say that. But that's okay. That's why we have these conversations. That's why we have these discussions. You don't have to 100% agree with Kyle to respect 80% of his analysis. You don't have to 100% agree with Jimmy to respect 90% of his analysis. But you don't have to attack their person. If we are going to move forward, the only way we're going to be able to do so is together. I've always said, people who have watched me from the very, 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 very beginning know that I've always said it's vetting season. And I don't want any shills in my movement. And I say mine because you should be calling it your movement also. You got blood, you got sweat, you got tears, you got time, you got money in this movement. It's your movement. Because at the end of the day, it is your time that is going to be wasted, or your time and your efforts that are going to be validated as much as it is mine. As much work as we've put into what we've done so far. But there ain't going to be no shills here. Not here. Maybe in the Democrat Party side. Maybe with the neoliberals, but they ain't here. And we vet. And we hold accountable. And when you are a shill, absolutely. Because Andrew Gillum got the work from every single progressive journalist that you can think of. Because there's a nuance. He didn't even switch up on the people that he endorsed or promoted or who was advocating for, except for that whole Cory Booker thing, which was stupid. So he did switch up in that regard. But you switch policy. You're done. That's it. And the number one policy that got you elected is now the number one reason that you're probably not about to win and Florida's about to be stuck with the Republican governor. Now, there are people who assert, just really quickly, that Andrew Gillum may be the better choice out of the two that are running. And it's 10% true. Because the only thing left is the environment. That's it. He's backtracking and sweet talking. He hasn't made hard press, this is what I'm doing for the education system. This is what I'm doing for the environment. This is what I'm doing for this. He's backtracked. So the only thing he has left is the environment. And if he backtracks in any sense with the environment, I'm not going to have a Democrat like Andrew Gillum who's going to be used because he's somewhat charismatic and he's a black guy to be ascended into the Democratic Party so he can run for office in 8 years, and then I'm going to have to deal with him and tell him about himself. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I don't want to deal with that. I'm sure you don't either. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, greatly appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you leave your thoughts and your comments below. And always remember, more than anything,